Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside Empire of the Sun, the Pacific War 1941 to 1945. This is a game that really does not need much of an introduction. It is designed by Mark Herman and published by GMT Games. This is the second printing of the second edition that was just released recently from GMT, and it is an upgrade of sorts in the fact that you have a 3-inch box now, and the Erasmus bod has also been updated with better flowchart system and a better explanation of how the card-driven system works. So if you have been, like me, curious about this game and wanting to try your hand at it, it is definitely a beast. This would be the edition to get. Right now, this is what I guess many people would consider to be the definitive edition. So without further ado, let's take a look at the back of the box. And as I said, it is a big 3-inch beast. I'm obviously not going to hit everything on the back of the box. It's very text heavy, but I'm going to hit some of the high points here. It says, Empire of the Sun 2nd Edition is Mark Herman's award-winning card-driven design that covers a Pacific theater of operations in World War II. This historical simulation covers the action from Pearl Harbor until the surrender of Japan. EOTS is the first card-driven game to move the system back towards a classic hexagon wargame while retaining all of the tension and uncertainty people have come to expect from a CDG. Players are cast in the role of MacArthur, Nimitz, and Yamamoto as you direct your forces across the breadth of the globe from India to Hawaii and from Alaska to Australia. This is represented on the single map based on a 1942 equal area projection of the entire theater of conflict. It does say here about the second edition. The second edition reprint now features version 2 of the card-driven solitaire system. It does say here, this note, the EOTS second edition reprint now features version 2 of the card-driven solitaire system, CDSS, allowing you to play either side against an artificial opponent for new players as a training program to rapidly improve your EOTS IQ. This version also includes the South Pacific scenario first seen in C3I Magazine number 30 from RBM Studios with a separate mini-map with a travel-friendly 11 by 17-inch footprint. I'm not going to go through the rest of it, obviously. Like I said, it's just very text-heavy, so we're going to hit the game contents and what other information here on the left side. It says, game contents comes with a 1 22-inch by 34-inch mounted map, 1 11 by 17-inch unmounted mini-map, 1 player aid card, 2 identical CRTs, 1 Japanese setup card, 1 Allied setup card, 2 Erasmus bot trifolds, 1 rule booklet, 1 solitaire rules booklet, 2 decks of cards, and 1.5 counter sheets, 2 10-sided dice. And these are the card samples of from the game as well as the counters. And it says the units are Brigade, Division, Corps, and Army. It is for 1 to 2 players. Each turn equals 4 months, and it is 150 miles per hex. The game meter, it is solitaire suitability of 9 and complexity at 7. And this is definitely a beast. So 7 may be a little bit of an understatement. It's one of those things where I've not played it, but from what people have told me about it, it's not that it's super complex, it's just that it's deep. There's a lot of decisions to be made, and the decision space is fairly large, so that's going to take a while to, soak it all in, grok it, and be able to make comprehensive strategy. So take a look inside the box. Here is the rule book and the CDSS book as well. And then this is the South Pacific map, which anybody who has the game from C3I Magazine will see this and recognize it right away. We have our CRTs and the Allied at Start reinforcement schedule and the Japanese at Start units. And then we also have, let me get these out of the way, we've got our player aid cards, our Allied Erasmus bot, and the Japanese Erasmus bot. 1.5 counter sheets, our mounted map, which is in a plastic bag, I'll take that out, our 2 D10s, a whole bunch of baggies, and our Japanese and Allied decks. Okay, so I've got the map laid out, and it's pretty much taken up the entire screen, I'm sure, but you'll get a really good look at it. Beautiful mounted map. I really like the look. It's got some, kind of slightly muted tones to it, which is makes things blend much more nicely than you'd expect, especially being that you've got a giant sea of blue, literally, and land masses here. Otherwise, you see kind of a sharp demarcation if you don't do it right, but it's done very well here. I really like the look of it, and it has as you expect with GMT mounted maps, all of the information that you're going to need is on the sides of the board, and keeping it out of the way of play, but giving you everything that you'll need along the top, the sides, the corners, and the bottom here. So you got your movement chart here, replacements over on the left, strategic record track, game turn record track, political will, war in Europe track, and then you got your terrain effects chart, India status at the top, Japanese divisions available in China, Burma road status, Chinese government front status, inter-service rivalries, because that's actually one of the things that happens in this game between the naval and land forces of the US and the Japanese. And the area covers from Ceylon and India in the west down through Sumatra, Java, and the northern part of Australia in the South Pacific, all the way across to New Hebrides and Phoenix Island, and up to Hawaii, and the very tip of southern end of Russia, and the Adak Islands in Alaska. So a pretty large scope of area. Now that we've got to map out, let's take a look at these player aid cards. We've got the Allied at start and reinforcement schedules here for the at start, turn 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10, all the way up to 11 for the Allies. Then you have the Japanese at start, and their reinforcements come in from 2 through 10. Then we have 2 CRTs. Just look at one. We've got our ground combat results table, air naval combat results table, Allied HQ national command chart, terrain effects chart, inter-service rivalry, which is what we were talking about a moment ago. And on the back is the battle factor calculator. We have our player aid card, which gives you the sequence of play, offensive phase, strategy cards, and then a breakdown of all of the counters in the game, and then how you use the cards. If you're already familiar with CGs, you'll know that you have your operations value. They also have different uses. Black is military, yellow is political, green is resource, and blue is reaction. It tells you the card type, card number, and then the event that is played on the card. And then also here you have the intelligence values. So inside, we've got reinforcement placement, allied replacements, how those are handled, the replacement chart, submarine warfare, supply lines, unit activation, aircraft zone of influence, and how that works. And then on the back, you've got your U.S. political will, national surrender. And now we'll go to the big addition in this, which is the Erasmus bot. I've seen a copy of this game before, and this is a different look than what was in the second edition, I believe it was, that I saw, or maybe first, I think it was second. It was a flow chart, but it was different. It almost looked like tables, whereas this is much more of a standard organic flow chart that you can more easily follow. I really like the look of how this lays out. Plus, it's a trifold, but it's not too big. It's kept landscape rather than portrait, so I think that's easier to read and also easier to get much more information onto the player aid chart. And then we've got the Japanese Erasmus bot, which is the same. Now we're going to take a look at our counter sheets. Not a lot to look at here, just one counter sheet and a half. You've got Japanese forces, land forces, and then also naval forces in white. I believe, yes, the naval forces for Japan are in white. And then you have U.S. Army units, you've got Commonwealth units, Marine Corps units, Marine Corps Aviation, Army Air Corps, and then you have a bunch of admin counters, and then your naval vessels for the Commonwealth, the U.S., and the Japanese, as well as more admin counters. And then the South Pacific map is pretty much the same as this map. It is covering this part of Australia into New Guinea and across over to the right to New Hebrides and the Solomon Islands, and then up north in the Caroline Islands. This is, if you have South Pacific already from C3I number 30, which is what I have, and just a word of advice, if you guys get these clamshells, they're fantastic. You can put 2 magazine games inside them, put them facing each way, you'll know exactly which games you have. But this was already in C3I number 30, which is a way to kind of break into the game a little bit. I think the rules are modified somewhat. These are the cards. I'm not going to open them up. There's really no need to go through all the cards, but that's what the card looks like exactly, which we've already seen in one of the books. But this is the Japanese deck here. And we'll start looking at this rulebook. It is a 50-page rulebook. And, like I was saying before, this is, from what I've been told, speaking to people who have experienced the game, they say it's a game that you're going to have to take some time with and grok it because there's a lot to digest. The rules themselves, though, actually only go to page 31. So it goes from 2 to 31. 29 pages is not a tremendous amount of pages to digest. It's just how everything works and all the options you have, because you've got 2 decks of cards, which really will change things up because it's always going to be a variable options to you each time due to that. And then from there you go to your scenarios, master scenario list, comprehensive example of play, designer's notes, bibliography, and index. So take a look through the rules. Here in the first page, you have your ground units and how to read the counters. Strategy cards, the glossary explanation, and the same again with your cards, how to understand those. And let's go back to these real quick. We've got the units in the game, aside from the US Navy, Japanese Navy, and the Commonwealth, British, Australian, and India, and New Zealand. We've also got the Dutch, the Chinese, and the US and Japanese armies. And that pretty much covers the units that are in the game. Next page here, we will see we've got long-range bombers, amphibious assault capable units. Goes through all the different types of units that you can that you'll see in the game. It's setting up the game, general course of play, and then also explains the scenarios, how to set up with scenarios and handle those, as well as the full campaign setup, and then playing other scenarios, then the full campaign. Then we get into the sequence of play. It breaks it all down for you. Strategy cards, operations value, intelligence values, each section of the card and how to understand them and how they work. Reinforcement units and reaction events. Political events and how you draw, remove cards, and handle special event cards. The zone of influence, supply activation, and hex control. And we've got some illustrated examples of play, my favorite thing ever in a rulebook. Supply and attrition, a whole bunch of stuff on supply here. You have hex control, aircraft zone of influence, hex control, offensives, how they work and their sequencing, movement and stacking, base movement allowance, movement through enemy occupied hexes, some more examples, illustrated examples of play, strategic naval movement, naval unit stacking, emergency air moves, strategic air transports, ground movement and stacking, movement restrictions with that, the Japanese organic naval unit transport capabilities, battle resolution, just a whole plethora of options to go through here. So I'm not going to read through everything. I'll just flip through it. You guys can watch and see. You can also download the rules from GMT directly so you can get a better idea instead of me just reciting off to you what's in the rule book. Then we get to scenarios here on page 33. And that's when we get into the 1942 scenario and setup, and the short game, inter-service rivalry, political will events, 1943, 1944, and the cards that are used in that for the setup. And then we have the shortened campaign, the event shorter campaign as well, and then South Pacific, which is the edition that we talked about that was originally from C3I. And we've got special rules and a delay box. There's your South Pacific setup, and then the master scenario setup list, and then an optional rule here for USCV amphibious transport. And then we have the comprehensive example of play, which starts on page 47. And this is game turn 1 of December 1941. So it starts you off with step 1 of the game and works you through that for about 4 pages. And then you have designer's notes from Mark Herman and reprint designer's notes and then an explanation of what's changed. And this was all done by Mark in August of 2014. And then you have the bibliography that was used for the research for the game and the index at the back. And that is, and then you have a sequence of play outline here as well as the credits. And then we have the CDSS, the card-driven solitaire system. This has also been upgraded considerably from what it was in the original that I saw. I think it was like 4 pages or something. It was just a simple handout, it felt like. This is much more involved and better explained. So this looks like it will be much easier to learn and really walks you through everything. tells you the sequence of play with Erasmus, how this card selection works, task force composition, the offensive example. So it walks you through with illustrated examples from the flowchart on how to read those and how to understand them. And then it gives you a continuing example of play. And it says, let's pick up the game from where the previous example left off and use the Allied Erasmus charts against the Japanese Erasmus chart, which is another thing you can do is you can, if you want to learn how the game plays, is to kind of play the bots against each other. That will give you, at least this is one of the things I'm thinking of doing, and I think I've read it somewhere that somebody, might have even been Mark that recommended it, to have the bots play against the bots, just so you can kind of grok how the sequencing works and how the decisions are made, and that way you kind of know what to do with the cards you have in hand, because sometimes you'll have these cards and you won't know exactly what to do because you'll feel overwhelmed with everything to remember. And this way you can kind of cheat somewhat, if you will, by having the bot walk you through it. But that is a look inside Empire of the Sun, the Pacific War 1941 to 1945, the second printing of the second edition. This is now available from GMT, and if you're like me, as I said earlier, and have been curious about this one and wanted to try it, this would be the definitive edition currently to learn from, because it's got the upgraded bots, it's got the upgraded CDSS book, all the errata is in here, any errata that's needed to be made, and then you also have the South Pacific game as well as an addition that you could take with you on the road. If you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.